Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor. Today I'm away from the studio. I'm actually in front of a room full of patriots pouring into people who are ready to fight for faith, family, and freedom in their own communities. It's one of my favorite things I love to do, but I cannot let the day go by without walking with you too. So ahead of time, I sat down and recorded this conversation just for moments like this. I'd love for you to share one concrete thing that you're doing to push back and build something beautiful right where you are. This is part of a movement, and it needs your voice in it. Before I became a full-time political and cultural commentator on YouTube, I was an educator. I taught for 20 years in classical schools and the university level. And in many ways, I still see myself as an educator. Basically, I replaced the classroom with a camera and the lectern for a microphone. So I'm still teaching, I'm still educating, different subjects, primarily politics and culture now, and in a different sphere of communication. And yet, what's just so interesting is that for our founding fathers, or in fact all of the ancient philosophers in Athens and Jerusalem and Rome, they all recognize that education and politics are inextricably linked. In many ways, education is politics, and politics is education. They're not separate domains. They never were. In other words, what the classroom produces will inevitably affect the public square, and that public square is going to influence the classroom. More and more parents have come to this realization. You already came to this realization years ago, I'm sure. But some of them were shocked into it. I think the whole COVID situation was a real watershed moment for our nation in this sense. Because once classes went online, parents, most for the first time, got a front row seat on what their kids were actually learning. And they were shocked by the bizarre indoctrination that had infested the classrooms. I don't know how many of you know, homeschooling shot up nationally 300% that year. I mean, it's like, duh, you know. But what so many people, or what so many parents, I should say, were suddenly confronted with was precisely what the ancients always understood. Politics and pedagogy, classroom and culture are absolutely and inevitably intertwined. And that profound connection is exactly what I want to explore with you tonight. And what we can actually do is we can get a very clear vision of this connection with a deceptively simple question. What is education? What precisely does education mean? Now, I've actually asked educators that a lot. It's rooted in a Latin word, so a lot of educators don't know that. So I asked, do you know what education means? And it's so funny to have them look and say, I never thought about it. Right? Not classical educators, most classical educators. So I'm not going to put you on the spot. Oh, good. It comes from the Latin term educare, and it literally means to lead out. To lead out. So we all know the word duke, right? Educare. A duke is a leader. So to educate a student is literally to take them by the hand and to lead them somewhere. The Greeks had an ancient Greek word for the teacher who led the student, and they were called the pedagogos. We get the word pedagogy from that. So education is all about leading students. Now, the moment you hear that definition, what's the obvious follow-up question? Right? Where are they being led to? And who's leading them? Led to where? Where are they going? And that's the question.
And I want to argue that literally everything, absolutely everything, in any debate about education, it really does fundamentally come down to how we answer that question. Some believe we're leading them to be really smart, intelligence. Some believe we're leading them to a job, to career prospects. Some believe we're leading them to become, far left activists, whatever it is. The classical tradition, the tradition that was rooted in the three great ancient cities of Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome, had a breathtaking answer to that question. Education is not primarily, as you heard earlier today, I was so nervous when I hear Brandon and Sarah talking. I'm like, they're going to steal half my talk. And they started talking about paideia and all that. I'm like, well, I'll talk about politics. And put on the YouTube live stream. They had an absolutely breathtaking answer for this question. Education is primarily not about the transfer of information, though that's important. It's not about acquiring skills or accreditation or even a profession. All that's important, no problem, for sure. But fundamentally, that's not what children are being led to. Education, classically speaking, is fundamentally not about information, but about formation. It's not fundamentally about information, it's about formation. It's about shaping the character, training the affections, and ordering the loves of a human being towards what is ultimately true, good, and beautiful. An educated person in this classical sense was not simply an informed person. They could follow an argument. They're very smart. But an educated person fundamentally was a virtuous person, because we all know smart people who are not virtuous. I was going to say they're mostly in Washington, D.C., but they're not even that smart. An educated person is a virtuous person. Every one of our founding fathers deeply believed in that. They all had a classical education. The reason we could be a free people is because we were first a virtuous people. They would refer to our republic as a republic of virtue, because only a virtuous people can be a self-governing people. Now, to understand why that is, we have to go back to this ancient Greek concept of education that you already heard of, known as paideia. And again, you might recognize the word. So when your kids are sick, or just even for a checkup, you take them to a pediatrician. Same word, paideia, pedia. Pedia in Greek just means child. But in the ancient world, a few centuries before Christ, paideia became synonymous with the Latin term cultura, meaning culture. And as such, paideia referred to the totality of the values, the customs, and beliefs that we pass down to our children. So for the ancient Greeks, education and enculturation were the same thing. Education was not just schooling. Education was enculturation. It was about instilling the cultural and political norms of the city-state, which we call the polis. And so paideia and polis, from which we get politics, right? Paideia and polis were inextricably linked together. The paideia, in fact, was the polis in microcosm. The purpose of paideia was to form a particular kind of human person who can contribute to a flourishing polis. The more flourishing our young students become, the more flourishing our society becomes.
But first, when we think about war, we picture soldiers in battlefields, but the real damage doesn't stay contained. Take a look at what modern warfare looks like.
Why is this town covered in spider webs? And yes, this is real. The answer is those are not spider webs. That is fiber optic cable. And that is what warfare looks like in 2026. To prevent the drones from being jammed, they trail behind them mile after mile of fiber optic cable. And now the landscape is absolutely covered in thousands of miles of this cable.
And it's not just these fiber optic cables. Every time a missile goes off or a bomb explodes, microplastic particles are released into the upper atmosphere and spread globally, making their way into the air we breathe and the food we eat. Because they're so small, they get absorbed into the bloodstream and our organs, where they build up over time, triggering inflammation and increasing the risk of heart disease, cancers, and even Alzheimer's. But here's what's incredible. New research is now showing that certain probiotics found only in kimchi can bind to these microplastics and help remove them from the body. The results showed that people taking the kimchi-derived probiotic were clearing out nearly twice as many microplastics. And it doesn't stop there. Another study found that a specific strain in kimchi, Bacillus pumilus, can break down BPA, one of the most toxic chemicals in plastic. Now, what that means is your body actually has the ability to get rid of toxins, but only when your gut is balanced and functioning the way it's supposed to. But here's the challenge. Most people aren't eating kimchi consistently enough to get those benefits. So that's why Brightcore created Kimchi One, with over 900 plus strains of beneficial bacteria that deliver all the benefits of real kimchi in convenient capsules, no taste, no smell. It's all non-GMO, 100% made right here in the USA. Today, you can try Kimchi One by clicking the link below for 25% off your entire order, or for the best deal available, call my friends at Brightcore. Give them a call, and you're going to get 50% off plus free shipping. Call them now at 888-597-0233. That's 888-597-0233.
So, for example, Plato in his Republic, he makes this connection explicit, very startling way. He said that the human soul is a microcosm of the city. So you can read the Republic as a map of like the ideal society. But scholars have noted if you dig deep, it's really a metaphor for the ideal soul. When the soul is harmoniously ordered, the city flourishes. When the soul is disordered, when our loves and our desires are pointed in all kinds of wrong and debilitating directions, the city falls in chaos. And this paideia polis interplay made its way into the early church. Many of you may be familiar with the Greek word for the church. Who knows it? I hear you. Very good. If you're Spanish speaking, you're cheating, by the way, because they didn't change it. Ecclesia, right? Ecclesia. And what a lot of people don't recognize is ecclesia is not a, quote, religious term, historically speaking. It was a political term. Ecclesia designated the assembly of adult citizen males who held ultimate decision-making authority over the polis. So for the Apostle Paul, the church is the true polis. It is the true city. It's the New Jerusalem. It's the republic that Plato always longed for. And then we heard earlier in Ephesians 6:4, Paul exhorts fathers to raise your children in the paideia to Kyriou, the paideia of the Lord. Not the paideia of the Greeks or the paideia of the Romans, but the paideia, a distinctly Christian paideia. So from the very beginning of the Christian tradition, education was understood as forming children for citizenship. Citizenship ultimately in the eternal city of God. But what specifically does this formation look like? Okay, that's the big picture. That's what we're supposed to do. What are we supposed to be forming in these students? What are we supposed to cultivate within them? And in the classical tradition, again, stretching from Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome, they gave us a majestic answer in these 3 words. Classical students were to be immersed in truth, goodness, and beauty. Aletheia, agathos, and kalos. We still have that word for beauty, don't we? Calligraphy, right? Kalos, beautiful writing. We are supposed to immerse these students in these 3 values of truth, goodness, and beauty. For the ancients, truth, goodness, and beauty weren't just made-up concepts or so forth. They were literally cosmic values embedded in the universe, because the universe was filled with divine meaning and purpose. Now, these aren't abstract concepts. So for Plato and for the entire classical and Christian tradition that followed him, truth, goodness, and beauty were cosmic values. They were literally built into the very structure of the universe. And because the human person is a microcosm of the larger macrocosmic world, or in Christian terms, because we're images of God, the human soul mirrors those same three dimensions. So Plato taught that the soul's made up of three faculties: intellectual, moral, and aesthetic. And you call it logos, that's our rational intellectual capacities; themos, that's our emotional, ethical, volitional choice faculties, as it were. And then there's eros. The New Testament would develop that more as agape, right? That's our desires, our aesthetic sensibilities, the deepest longings of our heart. Now, each one of these faculties corresponds to these cosmic values. So truth reveals divine meaning to our intellect. It discloses divine reality to our minds, as it were. Goodness reveals divine meaning to our wills, our themos. It tells us what's the right thing to do. And beauty reveals divine meaning to our desires, to our loves, to our passions, to our deepest longings. And notice there's something extraordinary about Plato's understanding, particularly of beauty. He actually came up with a conception of beauty that was radically influential in the classical traditions. There are scholars who argue it's probably the most radical and important philosophical principle ever. I mean, you'll see it at the Sistine Chapel with Michelangelo. You hear it in the music of Mozart. You see it in great, cathedrals and so on. In the Symposium, Plato describes beauty not as something pleasant, not something that I kind of go, ooh, I like that. That's not beauty. That's pistachio ice cream. They're different. Although I love pistachio. Any pistachio? We form a cult here. This is right? Beauty is not just something we like. It's not a matter of preference. Preferences are fine, right? Pistachio ice cream is great. That's not beauty. Plato describes beauty as a physics. It's a law of attraction, right? When we find something beautiful, we are what towards it? We're attracted. It's a gravitational pull. It draws us. Beauty leads us. And where does it lead us? To the true and the good. By definition. If something is truly beautiful, it will awaken love and desire within me and draw me ever closer to the good and to the true. And it does so by awakening love. True beauty awakens love. False beauty awakens lust. And they're different. Very different. Beauty is the loveliness, the radiance, the delightfulness of the true and the good. And through the awakening of love, it draws us toward truth and goodness. So beauty isn't merely decorative. Beauty is motivational. Beauty is the energy, the momentum, the eros that propels us toward the divine. So this is why the classical tradition is so incredibly beautiful, right? Have you seen them? I mean, you just look at the cathedrals, you look at the art, the music, you hear the poetry, the dramas. And today, every once in a while, we actually get a really beautiful movie. There used to be a lot more, but now, and then they kind of fell apart. They're coming back. Even Pixar. Pixar was doing great. And then it's kind of, but anyway, they'll come back. The classical tradition never reduces beauty to mere personal taste. When you reduce beauty to preference, you've knocked out the engine of the whole moral and intellectual framework that forms a flourishing soul.
Love the channel? You'll love Patriot Alerts even more. Free daily news and my weekly wrap-up straight to your inbox. Sign up for free by scanning the QR code below.